Hey everybody, welcome back to the Namaste Wellness Show where we talk about all things holistic health for the mind, body, and spirit with a touch of cultural soul. My name is Laura. I'm your host. Thank you for joining me again today. Today I'm joined again by Dr. Robert L. Green. We are continuing our talk and conversation with him on his life and legacy as a civil rights activist, educator, as well as author. So he's already here with me. Thank you, Dr. Green. Welcome back.
Thank you for
Okay.
having me.
All right. So we're actually just going to do a continuation from our last show where we were talking about your career as an educator and the work that you also did at Michigan State University, as well as you were also the president of the University of District Columbia, and you were the first Black chairman of Piney Woods, which is a very prominent African American school down in Mississippi, which was a very racist state during civil rights. I know that, we still are battling, so to speak, racism, but nothing like it was back then. So I just want to kind of pick up where we started, where we ended on our last program, which was we talked about Michigan State and we talked about in 2021 that you were honored in East Lansing and they named a school after you. So I was just wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was surprised.
Mhm.
I did not expect a school to be named after Robert L. Green, an elementary school. As a matter of fact, my son Kurt attended Pinecrest
Mm,
all the way from K through, I think, fourth or fifth grade. So it was an honor, and it was near the university, near our home. So it was a good feeling. And
okay.
it was because they honored me because blacks could not buy housing in East Lansing. White realtors would not sell a home to blacks. As a matter of fact, there was one realtor, his name was Walter Neller. He said blacks will never live in East Lansing. He was wrong. I became the first one. And what happened, I can't quite remember the year, but uh, when I finished my PhD, we wanted to buy a home on Bessemer Drive. We found one in East Lansing. And no realtor would even show us a home.
Mm,
Well, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the president, passed, had passed an anti-discrimination housing bill, and I was the first black in the country. I can't remember the year, Laura. It's in the book. I have it
mm,
in the book. Uh,
okay.
he passed a law, anti-discrimination law, in the area of housing, and I was the first black in the country to sue under the Kennedy bill, and we were able to get a home.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we did talk about that. And so it actually opened doors for other Blacks, African Americans, and
Yeah.
probably other minorities
Other
to be
minorities.
able to purchase homes as well.
I
So,
went to John Hanna, who was the president of Michigan State at the time, and I told him, "Oh, I know how I came up." He said, "I'm looking forward to having you work with me and the students this fall." I said, "Mr. Hanna, I won't be here in the fall." He was shocked. He said, "What do you mean you're not going to be here?" I said, "I'm thinking of taking a job at Boston University." He said, "Why?" I said, "I can't buy a home."
oh,
He said, "Oh my goodness." He said, "Well, we're going to work on that." So he called the mayor and had the mayor come to his office.
mhm.
He said, "I want you to set up an anti-discrimination commission in East Lansing. And first of all, I want this young man to be able to buy a home. He's one of my faculty members. You take care of him." So that's how the East Lansing Human Relations Commission got started.
Mm-hmm.
And through the work of the commission, I was able to buy a home. It
Okay.
had nothing to do with money. It was simply due to race. They did not
Wow.
want to sell roses. They did not want to sell a home to black. So there was a very active human relations commission. There was a white couple, John and Betty Dooley, Duley.
Mhm.
They're both deceased. They were very open-minded, very liberal, and they were fighters for open housing. And they worked with myself and my wife Letty and others in the community to try to open up the housing situation.
Okay. Okay. So that, I mean, that was a major thing because, I mean, I know that you also talked on your book, and by the way, we are still talking about your book, At the Crossroads of Fear and Freedom, The Fight for Social and Economic or Educational Justice, that is by
Right.
Robert
That's
L.
right.
Green. And the book is actually sold on Amazon, and last I checked, you had a 5 out of 5 star rating on the book, and I would advise anyone to go to Amazon and pick up a copy. It's very informative as it relates to Black history, civil rights movement, and that type of thing. So, talking a little bit more about your career at Michigan State University, one of the other things you did was you started the College of Urban Development, and then you became the dean of the College of Urban Development. And you did mention to us, we were having some technical difficulties, so maybe if you can share with us about what was the reason. Again, I know you were sharing it with us. I didn't know if some of the technical difficulties interfered with that. Why you started the College of Urban Development, and what was the purpose of the College of Urban Development?
The goal and objective of the college was to provide students with an opportunity to understand the development of urban communities and how these communities could benefit, how these students rather could benefit from people who lived in those communities who were interested in fairness, equity, and justice. So we had a curriculum with coursework, sociologists, psychologists, educators were all on the faculty, and we were training students to become active in that area. And it was quite a program, and we brought through that also the Center for Urban Affairs, which was a part of the College of Urban Development.
Mhm.
And that Center for Urban Affairs is still existing. And a young man by the name of Dr. John Schweitzer is heading up that program. But the college was a very important entity on campus, and students wanted to know more about discrimination. There were the interesting thing to me. One day after I gave a lecture, a young white student, male student, came up to me and he was tearing. And I said to myself, "Oh my goodness, what did I do? What did I say?"
Mhm.
So I said, "Young man, are you okay?" He said, "I'm not so sure." He said, "I listened to your lecture in class today, and my grandfather was one of the white men that worked to keep you from buying a home in East Lansing." He
Mm.
started to tear even more. I said, "Well, look, let's look at it from this way." I said, "You are not responsible for what your parents did or did not do, or your grandparents. You can be a good person and fight to end justice, injustice in your lifetime." And
Right.
I think that helps them quite a bit. I said, "You're not responsible for what your parents or grandparents did or did not do. You're only responsible for yourself." And
Right.
that's the story I always share with students.
Mhm.
That, you know, if they have an obligation to do the right thing, an
Correct.
obligation to be fair, an obligation to not hurt anybody else.
Correct. Well, now that you're bringing that up, I guess it brings up a question for me because would like to get your opinion then on some of the things that are going on today where, um, or let me just ask you this, how do you feel about am I saying this right? Reparations
Reparations.
for, African Americans? Because most of the people, or a lot of the people that were promoting and acting in those very, very racist ways during civil rights and prior to civil rights, do you think that you're saying that the white people now, are they expected to pay for what their ancestors did to blacks? Or do you think that, how do you view reparations?
Well,
Or
there are people who are in favor of reparations. I'm not opposed to anyone making amends for the past. If you
okay.
get wrong and you want to make amends for it, fine. I don't know if there's going to be a law
Mhm.
related to reparations. I think there'd be a lot of resistance to it. People will say, as this young another white student said to me, and he was right. I'm not responsible for what my parents did.
Mhm.
I don't think I should pay for it.
Okay.
You'll get that attitude
Yeah,
uh, from a
as
lot.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Okay.
my concern is now.
Right.
Let's be fair at this time.
Right.
Fairness in terms of education, fairness in terms of non-discrimination, fairness in terms of employment.
Right.
Most important of all, fairness in getting our kids into good schools, getting a good education uh, at every level. That's
Right.
my concern now.
Right. Well, I know that from reading the book and talking to you that education has, and I think I'll say it right now, reparations. Am I saying that correctly now? I keep this
Preparation, yeah.
reparations. Okay. I know Dr. King, as well as yourself, felt that education was very important. And I think he even felt that there was a lot of ignorance on the side of white people, and that was why they were so racist, because
Right,
of their own ignorance.
right.
And they projected that onto Black people, and they feared Black people being educated because they knew, or they felt that if Black people were as educated as they were, then somehow they would,
Displaced him in
it
terms
would displace them. Yeah.
of employment. And there's another thing that Dr. King, I think, did for the Black community more than any other major political leader.
Mhm.
He taught Black folk not to fear
Right.
fighting for freedom, not to fear fighting for justice, not to be fearful of protecting your family.
Right.
And so uh, King was the one who motivated me to write this book at the
Okay.
clear crossroads of fear and freedom.
Right.
And I, I never really was afraid, probably of anybody,
Hmm.
but especially people I felt whose goal and objective was to harm you
Right.
and to deny you basic rights.
Right. Of
And
course.
so that's why at Michigan State, there were forms of discrimination at Michigan State. I remember one dormitory, I think it was called Landon,
Mm-hmm.
Landon, Landon Hall.
Uh-huh.
And if a black female student was in a room and the white students showed up at that room, the black student had to give the room up. They had to give it up. So
Wow.
a black female told me that. I wasn't not aware of it. She
Uh-huh.
came to me in tears. She said
Wow.
the dorm counselor came to me and told me to pack my things. They were going to move me out. I said, why? She said, because they wanted to put a white female student in the room.
So
So,
they just flat
no,
out told you that, huh?
yeah, there were forms of discrimination at Michigan State. Michigan State used athletes. They used black athletes like Bubba Smith and others to play and win games and to bring money into the institution.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that that was important and okay, but on the other hand, I felt it was very important for black students to be treated fairly in all of the various colleges and programs at Michigan State University.
Right.
John Hanna, I must say, was a very fair person.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we went to him about discrimination, he would try to correct it.
Mm.
He was
Okay.
fair. I have to say, I have no bad feelings about John Hanna as
Right.
president of Michigan, and also followed by him, Clifton Horton.
Oh,
Clifton Horton was a tremendous person who fought to make sure that all students at Michigan State were treated fairly.
now, do you think that had you not had um a president, a white president who was fair-minded, and the other person that you just mentioned, do you think that uh civil rights would have been able to get as far as it did? Because it sounds like there were some um whites that were, you know, supportive, and they marched along with you, and they stood up and took stances. Not a lot. It didn't seem like there were a lot of them, but there were the ones that there were some that were in power, that had the power to move the masses. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, John Hanna was a good man,
Yeah.
had a good leadership. Cliff Horton followed him. He was also a good person. Cliff
Mm-hmm.
Horton. He's still alive, by the way. I think he's 90 something years old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He lives in New York City. But
Wow.
the two of them played a key role in bringing just treatment for all students to Michigan State.
Okay. Well, talking about, the name of the book, I want to move and talk a little bit more about your work on the March for Fear, which took place in Mississippi. And after there was a young man, James Meredith, after there was a refusal to follow the law, there had been a law in place to admit African Americans into schools in Mississippi, white schools in Mississippi's, but they were refusing to follow that law. And there was a call by Dr. King asking you to provide leadership on the March for Against Fear. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Martin Luther King Jr. always felt that, and it was true, I got along well with students,
Mm,
black and white, because I was at a college. I was at a major
right.
university, had been there for a long time. And Martin Luther King Jr. would say, get Dr. Green on this march. He knows how to deal with students. Students will listen to him.
Mhm,
And at that time, there were many white students who came from the north, from
mhm,
northern universities, northern communities, and they were white. They were not afraid of white people because they were white. And you had to talk to them and let them know that you have to do things in a non-violent way. Because
mhm,
when you leave, those whites that you talk bad to, the blacks are going to still be there and have that as a challenge in their lives on a day-to-day basis. So what I would do, we'd have workshops, and in the workshops we would find ways to make sure that white, not just black, but white students
mhm.
understood Southern behavior and Southern laws, not to abide by them, and to resist them, but to do it in a nonviolent way.
Okay. Now I have a picture. This is that I wanted to share to see if you remember this one with this was on June 7th, 1966, and I'm gonna try to just put it up there. Can you see that?
Yeah,
Okay. This was during that march.
it was during the Meredith March, right?
Uh,
And Dr. King, the highway patrolman told us we couldn't walk on the highway. Dr. King said, "Why?" He said, "We only want to go to Jackson, Mississippi." And the highway patrolman said, "I don't care if you're going to China, get off the highway." Dr. King said, "We don't want to go to China. We want to go to Jackson, Mississippi."
Right.
That irritated the highway patrolman, and that's when they shoved Stokely Carmichael to the ground. And that's when I provided cover for Stokely, because we were always taught that if someone is being beaten by a mob, we are to protect them. We put
Okay.
our bodies on them and cover their bodies with our bodies, and we take the beating. So it was right after that. What page is that on, Laura?
This is on page 33.
Oh,
And in
30.
the picture, you're in the picture with Dr. Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael,
Yeah,
and then you with yourself, and then Floyd McKissick. I know this is someone you speak of as well. And you all were singing We Shall Overcome.
we're singing "We Shall Overcome."
Yeah, so
And
yeah.
so we were taught to protect our others, and don't be afraid. Martin Luther King Jr. If you ever have an opportunity to play some of his old sermons, uh,
Mhm.
sometimes I'll find some of his sermons in Alabama, Mississippi, and so forth. You'll always hear King say, "Don't be afraid,"
Right. Now
because
you mentioned, maybe we can touch on that a little bit because you mentioned, I didn't realize, I guess I hadn't gotten to that part in the book that you were in the military. Did you go into military out of high school, or when were you in the military? How long were you there?
I was drafted in 1954
Mm,
into the United States Army, and I was there for two years.
mm,
And I worked on a ward that contained men who were serving multiple years in an army prison
mm.
for crimes committed uh, while they were in service. And
Oh, so that's where you were a prison guard at then.
uh, I was a psychologist. I had finished my PhD in psychology,
Oh,
and a lot of these, I worked on a psychiatric ward.
oh,
I
okay.
worked on a ward in which men who committed robbery, rape, murder overseas
Mm-hmm.
were sentenced, uh, some to life in prison. And that's where I spent my working time while I was in the military.
Got you. But you also worked as a prison guard at some point too, didn't you?
After I got out of the army, yes, you're right.
Oh, okay.
I, I was a prison guard at San Quentin
Mhm.
for a period of time. And
Okay.
so,
Now,
yes, so that's why I always tell young people when I say you don't want to go to prison, I
mm,
know what I'm talking about. They said, "Well, how do
mhm.
you know?" I said, "Because I've been a prison guard." They said, "Look, you were a guard." I said, "Yes, I was. I was a prison guard at the toughest prison. I think they closed it down, San Quentin."
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I thought San Quentin was a pretty high security facility for a prison. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Wow.
one of the toughest prisons in the country.
Okay. Well, you were also a boxer. So when were you when did you box? Weren't you a boxer at one point?
I never really was a boxer. I hope I didn't put that in the book. That's not in the book. Uh,
No,
uh, I
no, you didn't put in, I mean, I didn't see it in the book, but I thought you had mentioned at one time you were a boxer. I must have
well,
I must have misheard you. Okay.
well, I was never a boxer. My father was a Pentecostal minister,
Oh, okay.
brought up in the church,
Uh-huh.
and I would protect myself. I lived in a neighborhood of pretty tough boys,
Uh-huh.
and I was raised to not be afraid and to protect yourself. And I had four older brothers.
Mm,
One was a military man, one was a medical doctor, one was a school teacher.
mm,
But my brother John was a colonel in the army,
mm.
and he was never afraid. And he was kind of like a role model for me. And I used that leadership to make sure I did the right thing, but I never allowed anyone to harm me or put me in harm's way.
Right. I think that's kind of where I was trying to get to your background a little bit and what made you be feel that way, that you had no fear and you weren't afraid to. I mean, it's amazing to me to watch the history and the marches and to be in those situations and not fear. As we talked before, Dr. King didn't even fear death, and that was in one of his quotes in your book, was how he said that you can't you can't be overwhelmed by your wealth and you can't be afraid to die, if you're going to um be in that civil rights movement.
Right, right.
You couldn't be afraid,
It
and
was
I
my
think, go ahead.
experience, Laura, that many white men, especially in the South, were fearful of blacks.
Mm,
And I knew early on that if you stood up to them
mm,
in a strong, forceful, nonviolent way, they
mm-hmm.
would leave you alone.
Okay. So
Um,
so
but
that was one of the keys, right? To staying safe or to maintaining your own dignity,
that's right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was, I can tell you something that never happened.
Mm,
James Bevel was an activist who worked for Martin Luther King Jr. And we were having trouble. As a matter of fact, it was right there in Grenada, Mississippi.
mm,
And Bevel uh, sent a message to President Johnson, I believe it was to Johnson, that he was going to put 5,000 black kids on the highway and they were going to march to Washington
mm.
and demand a civil rights bill. I'm told that Johnson believed that it would happen. And he had that horrible thought of 5,000 black kids walking on an American highway,
Wow.
Washington,
Wow.
speaking for freedom. And that caused him to take quick action for justice in Mississippi.
Mm. Okay. Well, I guess that does give you some food for thought about those many children walking down the highway. Uh,
Exactly.
Now, there were some other things that happened during or prior to the March for Against Fear. There was a torture and murder of Emmett Till. Now, that was a major event. Do you recall?
I
Hap-
knew I didn't know him personally, no,
Okay,
but of course I knew about the situation there
that
and
happened around
black
that time. Yeah.
who knew his family, and that left a very negative impact on the black community
Right.
and the whites, somewhat on the white community too. So people were, you knew you were going to die one way or the other. So
Mm.
if you're going to die, die for freedom.
Okay.
Was what we were taught. That was the
Now-
way I felt. And this is what I taught my students at Michigan State. When we would go south during the summer, black and white students, I said, don't be afraid.
mhm.
Justice. Fight for the right thing. And things usually will work out for the good.
Well, you know, one of my favorite sayings is give me freedom or give me death. That's a popular freedom. So that's definitely, you know, like you were saying, if you're gonna die for something, you know, die in the name of for freedom, you know.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
there was another murder around that time, Medgar Evers murder that occurred around the same time of the March for Fear. Um, and it has, in the book, it says that in 1964, police supervised murders of 3 civil rights activists, 1 Black man, 2 Jewish men, and these 3 men were all in their 20s. So, you know, there was some major things going on between 1964 and 1966, you know, not to mention prior to and even after that for civil rights.
Right.
Um, what would you say the major outcomes of the March for Freedom were? And as it says in the book, it basically started, Dr. King asked for your leadership for the march, you know, after they were not following the law to allow African Americans to be admitted to the Mississippi schools. So what were the outcomes? Did it help to open up the schools for Black children? Do you recall some of the key outcomes of the March for Against Fear?
Yeah. Opening up schools was a big factor
Mhm.
because I saw books that were being sent to the black schools to use,
Mm-hmm.
tattered, torn, and not very neat.
Okay,
And so white kids got the best of everything,
right,
and blacks knew this.
right.
Uh, Many black students would see the name of local white students in their book that were
Mm,
given to
they
them.
were used,
Yeah,
yeah.
you knew they were second class tattered. We used to call it tattered and torn.
Mm-hmm.
Tattered and torn.
Pattern and tone. Okay. Well, maybe let's talk a little bit now about some of your other career as an educator, that is. You were also the president for a while at the District of Columbia,
Yeah,
Washington, D.C.
UDC, the University of the District of Columbia in
Okay.
Washington, D.C.
Okay. Now, was that something you were appointed to, or how did they do that? And how long were you there? And
I
were there
was
any
president. I was
major accomplishments there that you?
I was there for a couple of years
Mhm.
and did what I could to keep black students in school and
Mm,
doing well. That was my concern.
okay.
And, make sure we got equipment. Again, you know we were in Washington D.C.
Uh-huh.
and there was always, no matter where I went, uh, maybe it was because people knew about my background, they knew I would fight for
Mhm.
justice. You had to fight to make sure that your kids, your students, got the best instruction uh, uh, and the best equipment all along the way. Yeah.
Mhm. And how would you compare your experience at Washington? I know well, you had a lot more background, obviously, in East Lansing at MSU, but were there any things that stick out that you would in terms of comparing your time at Michigan State with the time at University of District of Columbia?
Michigan State had more resources,
Right.
better trained faculty.
Okay.
And so, again, this old double standard that the students at UDC, there were a few white students, but predominantly a black school in Washington. It was like the City College of New York,
Okay.
the City College of Washington, D.C. And students just didn't get what you got at Michigan State. Michigan State had all the resources that you could possibly imagine or want to have.
Okay.
And it was a state school
Right.
in Michigan.
Right.
And so you didn't have the challenges at a Michigan State that you had at a predominantly black school in Washington, D.C.
As a
The
city
college.
college.
I used to call it the City College of D.C.
City University. Okay, I guess that makes sense then. Okay, so what about now? Tell us a little bit about your work with Dr. Martin Luther King as the educational director for his Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
Right. Dr. King traveled a lot. He's gone a lot. And people would come to the office from Alabama, Mississippi, who've been mistreated, coming to see him. He wasn't there. He had a good trained staff who would step in and try to do the right thing. And I was part of that staff. There was another really good guy, Brother Hosea Williams. James Bevel, C.T. Vivian, we all worked closely together. And it was an effort to make sure, for example, a black guy would come in from Alabama, and his land was rezoned. And they rezoned his land, they took part of it. And he would come in to see Dr. King. Well, King wouldn't be there, so we would try to handle it if we could, and usually try to get to the Justice Department. There was a guy, he's deceased now, John Doerr, who was a good guy, and Bill Vanderhoel, who was another good guy, who both worked for justice. They did all they could to try to rectify the evils that were put upon blacks, that blacks didn't deserve, put upon blacks in Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas. Alabama and Mississippi, to me, were two of the most racist states of all.
And why do you think that was? Or maybe is it still? I don't know.
Well, slavery grew out of those two states. Those are major slave states.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Mississippi was a major slave state, and Alabama was a major slave state. And there was no effort to protect blacks. And I'll never forget that Martin Luther King Jr., after the bombing of the church in Alabama, and 4 or 5 little kids were killed, Dr. King was getting ready to preach a sermon, and 20 young black men came into church with rifles. And so Dr. King said, brothers, what are you going to do with those rifles? He said, we're going to go out and find 20 white men and we're going to kill them.
Wow.
Dr. King.
Like vigilantes.
Dr. King preached a sermon of his life. He said, okay, sit down. Put your rifles down. This is what's going to happen. You're going to go out and take advantage and try to get even with 20 white men for killing blacks. You know what they're going to do? They're going to jeopardize every white man in Alabama, send them over to the black community, burn your homes down, and deputize the white men, and they'll all be prepared to hurt your community. So
Mm.
when I see,
Retaliate, they're gonna retaliate.
I've been watching the conflict in Israel,
Mm.
and I went to Israel with Letty and the kids
Mm.
years ago. We stayed there, and not now I can never pronounce his name. Not now who
Netanyahu.
say he's going to go into some little community
Mm-hmm.
and wipe out so-called militant Arabs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if he does that, uh, the United States and other nation states will turn against him.
Mm.
Hopefully that won't happen.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Laura, I hope this has been helpful to you today.
Yes, it has been very helpful. I'm always glad to talk to you about civil rights movement, and I
Yeah.
always like to, maybe ask too, every once in a while I'll say, how far do you think we've come? I mean, listening to all the things, and then, and racism was in every part, it seems like every part of life, actually. I remember reading in the book where you said that your wife Letty, she was a Catholic, came up as a Catholic all her life, went into a department store and wanted to try on a dress. And the lady told her she couldn't try on the dress because if she tried on the dress, no white woman would want to buy it. So she would either have to buy the dress. And of course, Letty didn't go back. I don't know if you remember that
Yeah.
part. There was something in the book about that. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm kind of I'm telling two things at the same time. She was a Catholic, wanted to go to a Catholic service during the day, but when I guess, I don't know if you all were with her, but she went to the church and they told her you all had to come back for the evening service when they were given the service for African Americans. So of
Yeah.
course she decided she never went back to that church, right? And then there was the incident of the department store. So it's almost like every part of life, no matter where you wanted to go and what you wanted to do, you were always turned away, if you were, because of the color of your skin.
Yeah.
So I'm really learning a lot. And I'm always happy to have these conversations with you. But I do always want to ask once in a while, how far do you think we have come as a race?
I think we've made progress. Um, Education is so important.
Mm-hmm.
I've been blessed with my three boys. One's a lawyer. One has an MBA,
Mm-hmm.
and one has a PhD in electrical engineering.
Mm-hmm.
I watch it. I look at the opportunities that come their way that
Right,
never would come their way if they didn't have formal education. So formal education is so important
right,
for our kids. And it's important to make sure that we as parents start very early helping them learn how to read. Reading is key.
yeah.
When I worked in Las Vegas at a particular school, I pushed the teachers to push those little boys and girls. I
Mm-hmm.
said, get them reading by the time the first grade, second
Mm.
grade, third grade, you'll have a head start. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think we made progress. Uh, we're not where we want to be.
Mm.
We're not where we were.
Right,
That's key. We're not
right.
where we want to be. We're not where we were.
Well, I think one of the keys is what you said now is really focusing on where we are now is important too. And moving forward is important. So I guess from my eyes view, it seems like from what I'm seeing and reading about and hearing about, it looks like I know we've come a long way because I, you know, couldn't imagine experiencing some of the things that were being experienced back there. It was wouldn't even never even enter my mind until I start reading about it or
Right.
listening to someone like you or watching it on TV, you know.
That's
And
right.
so in my eyes, in my mind, it just seems like we're a lot further than we were. So I thank God for that. And I thank God for people like yourself who, again, I say this all the time, I appreciate all that you all have done to get us to where we are today.
And maybe later on, Laura, at some point in time, we can come back and have another session. I would be happy to do it for you. You were a good student at Michigan State.
Thank
Michigan
you.
State loves you, and so do all the students.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for being here. And we're definitely gonna get back together if I have anything to do with it. Because
Happy to do
we
that.
got more to talk about. So with that being said, I look forward to getting back together with you. And for my viewers and our listeners, thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll continue to tune in Wednesdays at 11 a.m. for Eastern Standard Time for the live broadcast, I should say. So until then, stay safe, stay well.
And
Namaste.
you stay safe and well, and your family. And thank you for asking me to do this. Ask me again, okay?
All right, my pleasure. Will do.
Thank you.